So you're about to see this pattern in where the White House hopefuls appear this weekend and the coming days. Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Florida, Ohio. That's no accident. They are fierce battleground states, and we are waiting for Donald Trump to take that stage there in Pittsburgh, in a state that has not supported a Republican for president in the past 7 election cycles. Trump strategists certainly know that, and Jeffrey Lord is one of them. He is here now with Bernard Whitman, a Hillary Clinton supporter and Democratic strategist, and Rebecca Berg. She joins us as well. She's a political reporter for Real Clear Politics. So, Jeffrey, on that note, let's start with you. We know Donald Trump is in Pennsylvania. He's going to be speaking there any minute now. Hillary Clinton shows up there on Tuesday. How does Trump reverse the Democrats' 28-year winning streak in that state and these other states that are traditionally blue?
Right. Pamela, I have to say, not for nothing do they call Pennsylvania a battleground state. I have been involved in Pennsylvania presidential campaigns in Pennsylvania in my misspent youth from the ground up. And I remember very distinctly when the sort of moderate Republican wing of the party said that Ronald Reagan should never be nominated because he would lose Pennsylvania. And they went with Gerald Ford, and he lost Pennsylvania. And 4 years later, they said the same thing, and Ronald Reagan won it twice. And then his heir, as it were, George H.W. Bush, won it a third time. It hasn't been won since. And I would suggest that Donald Trump is the first Republican nominee since 1988 that has a real considerable chance of carrying Pennsylvania. He's in exactly the right place today, in Pittsburgh and western Pennsylvania, where the state is a bit more conservative. He'll be coming back here to where I live in Harrisburg, central Pennsylvania, and what we call in Pennsylvania the T, which goes from the middle of Pennsylvania straight up to the New York border and left and right over to Erie and Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. I'm sure he'll be doing that. And then hitting those suburban counties in Philadelphia. And traditionally Republican, they've become more moderate in recent years. I think certainly he'll be targeting that as well. So it's a battle. There is no question about it.
And now we have another factor at play here, Jeffrey Lord. That's President Obama campaigning on behalf of Hillary Clinton. He did well in 2012 in white counties, particularly in Ohio, another battleground state. How much of a threat do you see him as?
Yes. I mean, there's no question the president will play a role here. It's not often that we've had popular presidents or reasonably popular presidents who can do anything. President Eisenhower was sort of kept sidelined in the Nixon campaign, and they later thought that was a mistake. President Reagan went all out for George H.W. Bush, and it helped him. Bill Clinton was a bit of a drag on Al Gore because of his impeachment situation, and the Gore people were not too happy with him, so they kept him out, which I think in retrospect was a mistake. And George W. Bush was not a help at all to John McCain. So in this case, I think President Obama can be a bit of a help here. He can also be a bit of a help to Donald Trump in the sense that if you're not an Obama fan, and there are people in Pennsylvania who are not, he can energize those folks as well.
All right. Well, Bernard, let's go to that. Regardless of all of that, President Obama does have high approval ratings. How effective do you think, Bernard, that President Obama can be in transferring his popularity to Clinton out on the trail, considering her unfavorables are still pretty high?
I think it's going to be extremely powerful out on the stump because he has his highest approval rating that he's had since his second inauguration. The base loves him. Independent voters are starting to look at the president, compare him to Donald Trump, and say, you know what, maybe President Obama actually hasn't been so bad after all. You know, we have had years and years and years of economic expansion, not to the degree that we need it, but he remains very, very popular. And I tell you, this election is going to come down, as most elections do, to turnout. When you have half of Donald Trump supporters saying, you know what, I'm going to have to hold my nose to come out and vote for him, turnout is going to be huge. And the president is beloved by members across the Democratic Party, particularly key constituents like African Americans, Latinos, love the president. I think you're going to see him go all out. And I will say, I was around in 2000. Huge mistake for Al Gore not to use Bill Clinton. I think it helps him lose that election. Hillary's not going to make that mistake.
Okay, and Rebecca, I want to talk to you about Mitt Romney's criticism of Donald Trump. He really came out and doubled down on Donald Trump, just saying he is unfit for office, that he's going to hurt America's values, that America will never be the same if he's president. Let's listen to sound from Donald Trump.
When I heard he was going to run again and I was thinking about running, I let him know. I said, The guy's a stone-cold loser. He choked, and when you're a choker, you can never give a choker a second chance. It's too important.
So your reaction, Rebecca?
Well, of course, this rivalry, Pamela, is nothing new. Mitt Romney, with one of the most forceful rebukes during the Republican primary of Donald Trump when he gave his speech calling Donald Trump's sort of politics on par with bigotry, encouraging that sort of thing. And so he's been a very outspoken critic for a long time now of Donald Trump. What makes Mitt Romney stand out now from other Republicans is that he has maintained his strong criticism of Donald Trump even as he's become the nominee. And Mitt Romney is in a different position than many Republicans. He's not currently in office. He's not a current leader of the party. He's certainly a figurehead, but he doesn't have any sort of obligation to keep the Senate, keep the House, any obligation to any constituents of any kind. And so it gives him a unique position to be able to air his criticisms without those sorts of potential consequences you could see down the ballot in terms of fundraising and getting out the vote for these Republican candidates. It is interesting that he is keeping up pressure on Republicans, as we saw from his E2 summit in Utah, encouraging them to soften their support for Donald Trump or even withdraw their support for Donald Trump. It's interesting that he's mounting this pressure campaign because certainly none of these Republicans who have endorsed Donald Trump and still are criticizing him, none of them are in a very easy political position here. They have responsibilities to continue to elect Republicans down the ballot and of course are under a lot of pressure from Republican voters at the same time. And so it really lays bare some of the divisions in the Republican Party now, and these are not going away anytime soon.
And what do you make of that, just on the heels of what Rebecca said, Jeffrey, that there's sort of this divide in establishment Republicans? There are some who say that, look, we're going to vote for Trump come November, but he's a racist, and they condemn what he says. And then you have others like John Kasich who basically say, look, my values don't align with his, I'm not going to vote for him. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, I do think that divide is there. And frankly, I think this is the surfacing of a divide, again, that has been there in one way or another for decades, going all the way back to Thomas C. Dewey in 1948, before any of us were around.
But Jeffrey, I mean, for someone like a Paul Ryan to do that, that's not very typical of the party's leadership.
Well, I remember a time when President Ford said that Ronald Reagan was an extremist and could never be elected president. There were plenty of Republican establishment types that took that view of Ronald Reagan himself. So, yeah, I have seen this before. I do think this is the time to pull together. It disturbs me. I mean, the Romney thing, I must say, his father did the same, pulled the same stunt, if you will, in 1964 when he was governor of Michigan and he refused to endorse Barry Goldwater. You know, Barry Goldwater is sort of the founding father, if you will, of the political version of conservatism. And George Romney went at him with a vengeance when he was the sitting governor of Michigan, refused to campaign with him in the fall. Mitt Romney is following in his father's footsteps. And I might add, this business about trickle-down bigotry and all of this kind of thing, we can all recall in 2012 the tape that was made secretly of Mitt Romney standing there in a closed private room talking about deriding the 47% of Americans who were never going to vote for him because they were going to vote for President Obama, a.k.a. what? Because they were on government assistance or they're black or whatever. I mean, that was his true feelings. I think that was not trickle-down bigotry. I think that was flat-out bigotry, and it was wrong.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there, but the good news is the three of you will be back after this break, and we want to talk about the speech that we're now expecting to hear from Donald Trump on Monday going after Hillary Clinton's